Alright, hey y'all, this is Enzi. I just wanted to do a quick message. We recorded this episode at the end of last week, and much of the episode is about Brittney Griner. And I just want to name that at the recording of this episode, we don't know how things are changing and shifting. And so I did the best I could with the information I had on this episode. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Welcome back to Kumba Hineni, a podcast on intersectionality, more than just getting deep. I'm your host, Enzi. Y'all, it's March Madness. The weather outside is pretty nice. Pretty excited about this episode, so let's get it going. So, when I think of March Madness, think of a lot of things, or more accurately, when I think about March, I think about March Madness. I think about a few other things as well, but particularly March Madness. And when I was a little girl growing up, I was obsessed with basketball. And I thought that I would be one of the first girls in the WNBA. Back up. There was no WNBA at that time, and sometimes I need to recalculate my brain to remember that. So I actually thought I would be one of the first women in the NBA, and yeah, that's just, I have no clue why I thought that I was. I'm not even that good at basketball right now, but in 96, 97 is when when the first season happened, but in 96, I remember being just so excited. But I also loved college basketball, particularly women's college basketball. And for me, I oftentimes dreaded March Madness and the women's basketball championship game. And that was because I seldom got to watch the game. Because the WWF at the time now is considered as the WWE. They had one of their big matches always, it seems to always fall on the same weekend as the women's championship game, and I would be so frustrated about that. Fast forward 2 decades, well, actually a little bit more than 2 decades, but just fast forwarded, and we are in this time where Tom Brady, I'm sure folks think he's great, and he just announced that he was coming back out of retirement. He wasn't even in retirement for a whole postseason. But he came out of retirement. And here's the thing. I'm not here to say anything about that. But what I do want to speak about is Brittney Griner, who is one of the most well-known, talented women basketball players we have in the United States. Has been in Russian custody for, folks are not actually clear for how long, and according to an article I read today, she may not be getting a trial until May 19th. Now the WNBA, the Phoenix Mercury, the U.S. women's basketball team have all called for and spoke out for the safety of Brittney Griner. What is decidedly quiet, though, is the rest of the sports world. The NBA. It is odd that we will find silence during this time. And also, there are conditions that we must change in our society. Women basketball players make 5 times more money oftentimes playing in a foreign country. And so many of the WNBA players oftentimes find themselves offsetting their income by playing during the off season in ways that other leagues, particularly in the U.S., would not find themselves doing. I cannot help but to think, what if we valued, well, everyone, but what if we really looked down at this gap and differentiating between pay and actually valued the work and the diligence that some of our athletes put in, and I would say most of, if not all of our athletes, as well as being naming the fact that, or the reality that I've observed, that women's sports seems to often be invisible, regardless of how well they do. Regardless of how many times championships are won. And we must shift the way we observe, and I'm going to stop and name that. I've been using very binary language, and it's because I'm speaking of this in the sports world, but we have the ability to make some shifts, to make some changes. We do not need to exist in such a varied pay gap. I know that we can do better. I want us to do better. I want us to push as far as we can possibly push to be the greatest that we can possibly be. Now I want to go back to Brittney Griner and be clear. I don't know, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but I don't know what's best for her in this situation. I'm not here to speak about that. However, I would really encourage folks to put energy out for her safety and her concern. It's pouring me out, and it's March Madness. We are also in the Minneapolis public school districts, as far as I'm aware of currently. It is Thursday, March 17th. Our teachers are still on strike. Our teachers don't make enough money, oftentimes. Particularly Minneapolis school teachers in the Minneapolis school district take a much longer time to get into a certain thresholds than other districts. Our teachers, our aides, our educators deserve to be seen in its fullness, deserve to have a livable wage. And I want to be clear, we all deserve to have a livable wage. All of us. And I'm not just talking about those of us who are capable of working. I mean, all of us should be able to survive. And whatever that takes. None of us should have limitations. And I want to back up, and I mean limitations based upon who you are. Right. And really wanting to ask this question of how do we be the best we can be in our best selves. And thinking about those teachers and students who I have really admired as they stand up for what they believe is right, and what an amazing, beautiful lesson that can be learned. And we have a long way to go, because one thing is clear as we are watching the ways in which things unfold is oftentimes our youth end up being really drastically impacted by this reality. So I originally planned on doing a Josh on poem, and I don't really have much to say because I have been really thinking really hard about this Brittney Griner situation and what does living in an upside down world look like. How do we lavish and how do we find ourselves enjoying the fullness of life so much to the point that we cannot distinguish between our enemy and our friend in a positive way? I think we could get there, y'all. And again, thank you again for listening to my podcast, Kumba Hineni, a podcast with intersectionality. This is Enzi, your host. Till next time, peace. Kumba Hineni, a podcast on intersectionality, more than just getting deep, is a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network, a product of Jew Folk Inc. You can email the show at podcast@tcjewfolk.com. For more information, go to tcjewfolk.com/podcast.